question number 1 comes from Mark. So Mark asks, I'm not totally sure what HRV training is. Is it biofeedback with breath work, or is it a specific type of training? I really love this question because I use that term a lot, HRV training. I use HRV biofeedback as a term a lot as well. And so I want to kind of clarify. So again, Mark is kind of asking, like, is HRV training, is that biofeedback with breath work, or is it a specific type of training? Again, great question. So let me kind of first respond to that word biofeedback, because a lot of people will ask, well, what is biofeedback? Because it's a term that has become even more popularized, I'd say, within the last decade. It's been around for a while, for quite some time. But really what biofeedback is a sophisticated way of utilizing your biology as feedback to training. And when we say training, that can be kind of on really many different accords. That can be breathwork training, as Mark is asking about here. It can be on exercise training, or it could be on other types or variances of training. So when I talk about HRV training, most of the time, this is not 100% of the time, but most of the time, I'm actually referring to biofeedback. And when we say biofeedback, in terms of heart rate variability biofeedback, that's utilizing different types of breathwork techniques in order to raise the amplitude of heart rate variability to create a stronger and more resilient nervous system. Now, the whole intent and idea behind heart rate variability biofeedback, and there was a great podcast I did with Dr. Leah Lagos, who's a preeminent expert in the area of biofeedback, wrote a great book called Heart, Breath, and Mind. Listen to that podcast. But in that podcast, we really discuss kind of the need to practice this on a daily basis in order to condition a response. So what does HRV biofeedback look like in this context? Well, HRV biofeedback is actually utilizing and leveraging technology that is assessing heart rate variability in order to kind of train the heart rate variability as an objective response in the upward direction, so raise HRV, but probably most importantly is the ability to kind of tap into the body's ability to respond to stress. And so therefore you will reduce kind of your subjective experience, and even I would say the cognitive experience of anxiety and of stress. So this would look like you hooking yourself up to some type of either PPG or EKG monitor to look at heart rate and heart rate variability, and then utilize different paced breathwork techniques in order to raise the amplitude or raise heart rate variability. Again, that change in breathing by reducing kind of your, changing the breath mechanics, but also reducing the pace of breathing, typically down to around 6 breaths per minute, or your resonant rate or resonant frequency rate, can significantly influence kind of your ability to handle and be resilient to stress. So with biofeedback training, we do this as a practice or a level of training so that we condition a response over time. And the idea is that the more and more you engage in self-awareness of stress, when we see heart rate variability drop and when you experience it subjectively, and the more and more you train to self-regulate your response to stress through breathing, through heart rate variability training and heart rate variability biofeedback, then the more and more the nervous system, autonomic nervous system, is going to send the signal to the central nervous system that is going to be kind of your natural inclination. That's going to be your natural reflex. So that when you're out and about and kind of the crap hits the fan, if you will, your body and your brain will automatically turn to this type of training, even or subconsciously to you, because you've conditioned that response, so that when you kind of come out of it and you come out of that stress response, it's not saying you will never experience stress and it will never impact you. It will. You can't train a resiliency to stress that doesn't have that allows no impact of stress on the mind and body. Like, that's just an inevitable part. But the interesting thing about it is that you create such resiliency and fortitude that when you do come out of these stress events, that you might even look back and say, wow, I didn't even realize, like, I was pacing my breathing. I was engaging in these more heart rate variability biofeedback type coping skills and mechanisms. And then, so the severity of the stress, the frequency or the duration of the stress are inhibited. So that's biofeedback training in a nutshell. The more and more kind of you utilize heart rate variability as a biometric and breathing and breathwork training as a biometric, the more we can condition the response. So one thing that I'll say is that the best way to maximize biofeedback training for heart rate variability is to find your resonant rate. So when we say resonant frequency, or we'll say resonant rate, this comes from the research of a guy named Dr. Paul Lehrer. And what Dr. Paul Lehrer found is that human adults, I need to clarify, human, because, we don't want to get this mixed up with dog resonant frequency. I'm joking. But with a human adult, resonant frequency rate is typically around 6.5 at the highest breaths per minute, down to about 4.5 breaths per minute. Now, or 4 breaths per minute even too. Now, one of the interesting things about this is that there's a lot of variance as to why people have certain or different HRV resonant frequencies. This can be due to height, can be due to weight, due to gender. For instance, my resonant rate is 5.0 breaths per minute. But what this rate does, and breathing at this rate does, is it again helps us to maximize heart rate variability. Now, do you need to know specifically your resonant rate? Not necessarily. It is effective to optimize HRV and stress resiliency. However, if you get your breathing down to 6 breaths per minute or around that ballpark, which would be like, a 4-second inhale, 6-second exhale, or 5 inhale, 5 exhale, which gets you at 6 breaths per minute. That's around the ballpark of where you want to be. Most people will actually experience a significant increase in these heart rate variability biometrics alongside a reduction in subjective stress by getting down to that rate. If you're able to identify your rate, which just wait, again, hanuhealth.com/waitlist, this is going to be a pivotal part of our health technology, is helping you to determine your HRV resonant frequency rate. So go join us, sign up, hanuhealth.com/waitlist. Then that again is going to be kind of like, it's the cherry on top. It's kind of the way of maximizing, of optimizing your ability to tap into your vagus nerve and vagal modulation. So I like resonance training as kind of my go-to. What does that mean? So for me, each morning I'll wake up and I'll do anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes of resonant breathing at my rate. What I like to do is a 5-second inhale, 7-second exhale, and sometimes I'll throw in some breath holds there, but I'll follow a pacer that way. I'll follow a pacer at 5 breaths per minute, and that for me will maximize my heart rate variability amplitude. What are you looking for in biofeedback? Well, you're looking to see, is that RMSSD value changing? Is your low frequency value significantly increasing during training? Not during rest, but during training. We actually know that at the 0.1 hertz area, we call that kind of the resonant rate or the meditator's peak. If you're able to move your breathing rate to align with 0.1 hertz, then that 0.1 hertz is going to actually resonate through the body. It's going to resonate through the brain, which is actually very consistent. 0.1 hertz would be right there at the alpha brainwave state, at the flow state. And again, this is a very systematic way of looking at it, but we can change heart rate variability in order to change brainwave functioning. It's pretty incredible how this resonates, or that resonant frequency will resonate within the cardiorespiratory system, but also too cognitively and within your neurological system as well, in the central nervous system. So I like to do resonant breathing, look at low frequency power, raise that power within my biofeedback session. And then after my session, I'll look to see, was there a change in the static baseline of my HF, or high frequency baseline? So prior to training, I look at RMSSD value and HF. And then during, I look at RMSSD and LF. And then after, I look at RMSSD and HF. So did I have a change during? And then is there residual carryover effect? And the more and more I practice, the more and more this is a compounding effect that will happen. And again, the more and more I see this play out in an everyday scenario. And that's the key, right? Like, please keep this in mind. The key here is that how is this going to play out in the real world when things happen and you don't have yourself hooked up to a heart rate variability monitor? Things happen and you're not able to kind of like take the time to kind of engage in the way that you might engage in a controlled condition scenario. that's where all kind of the work is put in. It's kind of like all the training that an athlete does, like in the Olympics for sprinting. And what really matters is like when they get into the Olympic Games and they're on the starting line and then the gun blows, or the gun goes off. The gun doesn't blow, the gun shoots. They probably don't even shoot guns anymore. I don't know if that's politically correct in the Olympics, but I drone on. So, Mark, great question. Hopefully that works. I mean, we could get into the kind of the different types of breathwork protocols, but I think for now, a great starting place is to engage in biofeedback for HRV. And then also too, just if you can find your resonant rate, find it like through a biofeedback clinician, which you can find at bcia.org, or, hold on to your horses, hanuhealth.com/waitlist. Love to throw that in. All right. Thanks again, Mark. Thanks for listening to the Hanu Health Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. This podcast would not happen without listeners and supporters like you. And the best way to support us and the show is to head on over to iTunes and provide us with a 5-star review. This helps us reach others and spread the good word of breathing and stress resiliency. If we read your 5-star review on air, please reach out to podcast@hanuhealth.com with your name and mailing address, and we will send you some sweet Hanu gear. Until next time, breathe better and stress less.